Fox Studios' Fant 4-Stick, directed by Josh Trank and written by Simon Kinberg, was released on August 7, 2015. The deeply troubled production was mauled by critics and fans alike and flopped worldwide. But earlier in its production, before Fox execs handed in their notes and Simon Kinberg came aboard, the movie was heading in a different direction than what ultimately ended up in theaters. In an August 18th article, Devin Faraci, presently of birthmoviesdeath.com, revealed more information about which direction Josh Trank and original screenwriter Jeremy Slater planned to take the Fantastic Four in as of 2012. In this video, we will explore what might have been the original vision of Josh Trank and screenwriter Jeremy Slater, go over the other news items that have come to light, as well as give an update on the movie's current failings at the box office. Revealed by an article on birthmoviesdeath.com, Simon Kinberg delivered a rewrite in 2014 of a script by Jeremy Slater, who had been hired in 2012 along with Josh Trank. Only the first act of Slater's script was used in the finished film, and essentially appears to have been padded out to make up the bulk of the film. birthmoviesdeath.com reports that Slater's script was closer in tone to a Marvel movie, with big action and lots of character interplay. They specify that elements included are the Fantastic Four themselves, Doctor Doom, Galactus, Mole Man, Herbie the Robot from the 1978 animated series, the Fantastic Car, a central action piece set in the streets of New York City against a gigantic moloid. Much like the released film, Reed and Ben are friends early on, working on the teleporter project. It's noted that the toy car which Reed teleports shows up again much later, an odd detail to cut since it establishes that the early teleporter and later teleporter lead to the same place, an eerie reminder that the characters have long been experimenting with something powerful and dangerous. The article goes on to say that in this version there is no elder Dr. Storm. Upon winning a scholarship, Reed begins working at the Baxter Building where he meets Sue and Von Doom. Reed clearly falls for Sue, but meanwhile the sinister Von Doom is passing Reed's research back to the government of his homeland, Latveria. This is also where Dr. Harvey Elder comes in. He's working with Sue on creating moloids. Meanwhile, Ben, feeling abandoned by Reed, decides to join the army, but he gets called soon enough by Reed, who will be leading an expedition into the teleporter against the wishes of the school. Sue and Johnny stay behind to operate the controls. Von Doom goes along for the ride, and like a true bastard, steals Ben's moment of glory by putting his feet down in the negative zone first. One huge difference between the script and the finished film is that there's an alien city on the other side of the portal. It looks like everybody's been wiped out by a major event. In exploring the planet, they bump into Galactus, who, using dark matter, zaps Doom and appears to kill him. Just as they teleport away, Ben and Reed are also hit by the dark matter, and the effect splashes through to the other side, catching Sue and Johnny as well. This leads to a familiar scene with the four being horrified by the new properties of their bodies, and it's specified that Sue's skin even turns invisible, revealing her musculature to the naked eye. As with the finished movie, the script jumps ahead, but much further actually, 4 years instead of 1. The four involved in the disaster are all making use of their gifts, for better or worse. Johnny has become a reality TV star, Sue's using her powers to help examine cancer patients, and Ben is working for the military under less than pleasant circumstances. Reed is in hiding, however, as the teleporter incident was blamed on him. However, he's had time to build both a Herbie robot and design the Fantastic Car. Apparently he wants to sell the Fantastic Car design, but Toyota says it isn't safe. Dr. Elder is still hanging around, but Sue, fearing the moloids are going to be weaponized, isn't hanging out with them much. Meanwhile, the Latverians have built a teleporter. Von Doom, apparently alive and now made out of dark matter, kills their team of explorers using shape-shifting and electrified with razor wire. He even kills the rulers of Latveria and starts running the place. Ben, wearing a trench coat and a hat as a disguise, meets with Sue. He's resigned himself to his fate, but is still pissed about Reed taking off. Sue's been trying to help cure Ben, but there's been no progress. Reed gets jumped by thugs armed with weapons of his own design, leading to his belief that Von Doom is behind the attack. He can't reach Sue to warn her, so he heads back to the US from Indonesia in his prototype Fantastic Car. Meanwhile, the Baxter Building is attacked. Johnny is there with a camera crew, attempting to convince Sue to join his show. During the attack, Dr. Elder gets mole juice on him and turns into a mole, just like in real life. A moloid also gets infused with dark matter. Sue apparently kicks loads of ass left and right. Reed shows up just in time for the dark matter-infused moloid, now a giant, to burst from the ground. As luck would have it, Ben was nearby and came running at the commotion. He gets eaten by the moloid, but fights his way out just as Johnny throws a flaming bus at the creature. Upon the moloid's defeat, Reed is arrested. Sue helps him escape captivity, however, and the team comes together to go to Latveria, where Von Doom has constructed a dark matter cannon. Von Doom has apparently been playing a dangerous game with Galactus, acting as his herald to find a new world for him to consume. Earth, naturally. However, now Von Doom intends to kill Galactus using the cannon. Upon reaching Latveria, it's discovered by the Four that the version of Doom there is just a Doom bot. Victor himself is still in the negative zone. The film wraps up with Marvel's first family warning the government about Galactus. They are given the Baxter Building as their home base and are preparing to deal with the eventuality of Galactus by using it as a school for young geniuses who can help them win that impending fight. So having just gone through the synopsis of the movie that we're not going to get to see, what are your thoughts on the film that could have been?
Well, first and foremost, I don't think this was the Fantastic Four either, any more than the movie that now is in theaters. However, unlike the movie now in theaters, this is a movie that I would want to see. This one actually sounds interesting. Doesn't sound like the Fantastic Four in the slightest, but it sounds like a cool standalone movie vaguely inspired by the Fantastic Four, just call it something else. What I like is that it fixes so many of the annoying issues from the current movie. First and foremost, it didn't really so much fix Ben Grimm, because it never broke him. Ben Grimm wasn't broken until Simon Kinberg did his magic on the script. Because here it's established that Ben Grimm was always Reed Richards' enforcer. He was always a tough guy and not a victim, which is something that Simon Kinberg thought was cool, evidently. Doom is still not treated right, but at least he's treated a little bit better. He's much more Latverian in this one, sending military secrets back to Latveria, which I think is a little bit silly, to be honest. It kind of reminds me of that plot line from The Big Bang Theory, where we learned that prior to the beginning of the series, Leonard used to date a Korean girl, which turned out to be North Korean, and feeding secrets of his research back to North Korea. But what I really liked is how they were transformed into the Four. Because one thing that really works with the script is that there is no Franklin Storm character. And those who've heard my earlier reviews and thoughts on the matter know that I think the actor playing Franklin Storm did amazing. But the character was written like utter garbage, just going around wanting to adopt everyone he meets and putting stupid ideas into the heads of the kids. So here they come up with the idea that they are to be the first ones to go into this new dimension on their own, but they're also smarter in how they do it. Because here both Sue and Johnny are present and they are there in the control room helping out, which is where they should be, while Reed, Ben, and Doom are the ones who go into Planet Zero, as it would later be called. And I really like this moment about Doom pushing Ben aside. Ben, who was of course supposed to be the first one to put his feet on the ground, but Doom took that honor from him. Now that's brilliant. I really like that. And what was also cool about this script is this exploration aspect. You have like this ancient city in ruins. And I'm not really that big on the body horror aspect that Trank kept talking about. What I want to see instead is more exploration of ancient ruins, discovering some old Lovecraftian aspects. I love that in movies. And here we have just that. And it could have been amazing seeing Galactus there in the distance, which of course would make for a weird visual, but I can see how that could be cool. And that's enough to get me hooked. And then they get back, and that's how Johnny and Sue get their powers. Because it just comes with the return journey from everyone else. Of course, then you have this 4-year gap instead of 1-year gap, which is really stupid. So I probably owe Trank an apology there, because I thought that was something that they did because his cut was such a mess that they just had to try to piece it together. But no, evidently that gap of several years was in the script all along. What's your thoughts on that?
I can understand why they did it. I think it's always hard to tell a superhero story because the movies that people really wind up enjoying for superheroes, it seems like, are the ones that actually advance their character along, that kind of send them along their journey to battle the villain. Telling an origin story can really slow a movie down. I mean, if you do an entire movie about the Fantastic Four's origin, I mean, that's pretty slow. So a lot of movies try to skip it, kind of briefly show an origin scene, and just, for example, look at the Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie, which barely had an origin scene for the Punisher, or look at the 2008 Punisher Warzone, which actually just had a couple brief glimpses, probably just as brief as the 89 Punisher movie. But the reason they do that is just like they just want to move along to the action, to what's exciting, to the character making progress forward. But of course they have to do it in a manner that isn't clumsy, and I can see why somebody would feel that lurching 4 years ahead in a story would be very clumsy.
Yeah, that's kind kind of my feeling. It's just like jarring, because here, at least if this was a movie and it was presented the way that we see from Jeremy Slater's script, then knowing myself, I would have been hooked and I would have been dying to see what comes next. And by next, I mean the next hour, the next day, the next week. And then jumping ahead 4 years, skipping all of the good stuff with all the explaining and learning what actually happened, what the heck is this place, just skipping all over that. That's a major cop-out to me.
I guess I still understand why a lot of studios are afraid of it and why it might slow the movie down. But on the other hand, with any story, and it doesn't even have to be a movie, I mean, it could be a book or a game or anything, you want to make the case for why you're telling the story. Like, why is this day in this person's life the one you want to describe? And if you can think of a more interesting day in their life, you probably shouldn't be writing the script that you're writing, and you should probably ditch that idea and go to the more interesting one. So if the origin story is the most interesting part, go with that.
Yeah, exactly. And here, that just goes to show that there were some scripting issues from day one. Jeremy Slater never had the perfect script. This script of his, it needed a few more rewrites to become a serviceable movie. However, I think that the premise for a serviceable movie was present within that script, but then they just rewrote it in the wrong direction afterwards. Because after this 4-year gap, then I think the script falls apart a little bit here as well, with this inclusion of the mole man, who suddenly comes in the middle of the movie without having had much presence before, but then he's introduced kind of like in the middle. That comes a little bit across to me like Venom in Spider-Man 3, just kind of like an add-on. It's like, what? Why is he there? How does he push the story forward? Because then you have like this major tonal story shift, which I don't really see working. That being said, though, I really loved this huge thing coming out of the ground, this mole thing, similar to the cover from the first issue of the Fantastic Four. I'd love to see that on film, and I really hope that Marvel will revisit that if and when they ever get the chance to do their own Fantastic Four movie, because seeing that on film, that would be priceless and pure Fantastic Four.
So with the product that we actually wound up getting, we see something much less ambitious. That leads to the theory right away that maybe this big set-piece-filled extravaganza was too pricey for Fox. I mean, they already spent a lot of money on the new Fantastic Four, of course, not the most ever spent on a superhero movie by far.
They say out loud that it's 120 million. If they admit to that, the actual number is probably much higher. I remember that some of the numbers that we heard before was that the movie had an initial cost of $110 million. That was the initial budget. But that was before the reshoots. Then they had to do lengthy reshoots, which lasted as long or longer than the original batch of principal photography. And that could easily have added another 20, 30, maybe 40 for all we know, million to the budget. And on top of that, of course, comes the promotion and advertising. Right. So we don't really know how expensive the movie is.
But if that initial number that they wanted to shoot at was $110 million, for example, I can see why this big set-piece heavy script wouldn't be exactly what they'd want to do.
Yeah, no, because if they were to film this script as is, or with all the action set pieces of this script as is, then we're talking a $200 million movie. And of course, they could make that investment if they really wanted to make a Fantastic Four movie. If they were determined that we are going to make this, we are going to get it right, it's going to be a vital part in our own Fox Marvel universe, then yeah, they probably should have invested that. But as we have also since come to learn, we always suspected this, of course, but we got it confirmed recently, is that Fox never had that vision and that idea. The movie was rushed into for all the wrong reasons because they were just afraid of losing the rights. And of course, when you make a movie without the vision and you just think, okay, we need to keep the rights and we need to keep it at the lowest cost possible. So cut this, cut this, cut this, cut this, and just make do with the rest. Of course, the irony, I think, is that if they actually had invested, say, closer to $200 million, then maybe the movie hadn't flopped as spectacularly as it did. Because as it stands right now, they're going to lose so much money on it, and that's because they chose to cut corners, make the worst. Well, of course, they didn't set out to make the worst movie possible, but that was the end result of the decisions and the creative process behind the movie. If they had made it with different intentions.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell that there was no joy for them in the actual characters themselves. I mean, that's the thing that Marvel always succeeds at, is you can tell they love their characters, and sometimes they make decisions that kind of alter the characters a little bit, but I think it's just because they don't want the characters to be rejected, but ultimately they still keep that love for their own characters right up front. But with Fox,
exactly.
You don't see that.
Yeah, no, with Marvel, of course, they have made some missteps as well. They're not perfect, no one is. But they have never made missteps of the same magnitude that Fox has. And yeah, as you say, you can see the love and the passion for the characters, and this determination that they're going to make the characters shine. That is present in everything they do. And you don't really see that in this movie here, which is a shame, because if they really wanted to, they could have made something special here. Of course, this movie here was never going to be the Fantastic Four of the comics. That just wasn't going to happen. But I can see a scenario where if they had given it a little bit more resources, if they had developed the Slater script in a different direction than what we see right now, we could have gotten a movie very much like the first X-Men. That is very different from the comics, but it can still nail some of the core aspects from the comics and be a very good movie in its own right.
In recent news, we also got to see Max Landis' script for Fantastic Four, which apparently Fox rejected. So basically, it's just a scene where Reed Richards is testing out the Fantastic Car in a barn, and it's kind of laden with humor, and they're kind of being like threatened by the authorities who are just like outside waiting to arrest them. And it's I got to admit, I actually kind of enjoyed it. It wasn't brain surgery, but at the same time, they got some humorous dialogue in there. The tone was fun. I mean, there was something there, even if it wasn't groundbreaking.
Yeah, I agree, because we can't really judge the script as a whole, because he only posted the first 4 pages, which is essentially the prologue. But what we got from it was this banter, this witty banter, which is what the Fantastic Four are known for. Keep in mind, this is one of the things that really was different with the Fantastic Four at the time of their inception. This banter, that they would quarrel, they would disagree with each other, and we get that here, and that is brilliant. And I think that's probably one of the weaknesses with the Slater script, because in this article that we referenced, we don't see any dialogue. We only get the story synopsis. But Jeremy Slater himself actually tweeted and then deleted a small exchange from his script, where he referenced a conversation between Reed and Johnny, where Reed asks Johnny, "Is that your girlfriend?" referring to Sue. "No, she's my sister." To which Reed replies, "Oh, you know you're black, right?" Oh, this of course isn't great dialogue by any means, but
at least it would have made a joke out of something that people were very obsessed with during the production and release of this movie.
It would have made a joke out of it, yeah, but I think I would have preferred to see Max Landis handle those lines right there.
Oh, no question. I really enjoyed the dialogue in his in the snippet of his script we got to see. So I agree, but there's still something very funny about the confusion between his girlfriend and his sister.
It just further confirms to me that between Jeremy Slater's story and Max Landis' dialogue, of course, the two were never going to be in one, but in a hypothetical universe, Fox could have made a pretty good Fantastic Four movie if they wanted to.
So also in the last week, we saw Margot Robbie of Suicide Squad reveal that she actually came close to winning the role of Sue Storm. So we don't know exactly how far she came, but what I did read was that she said she had a great conversation with Josh Trank. Apparently she enjoyed her conversation with him, thought it was a good conversation, which I maybe that's just her being nice. I don't know that when I think of things people say about Josh Trank, the phrase "we had a great conversation" doesn't enter my mind. What she did say was that the script didn't connect with her, and of course the popular thought on this is that this probably did her career a great big favor not to have won that role.
Oh, absolutely. She dodged a bullet out there, no question about that. I think her career would have taken a very different trajectory if she had wound up playing the role of Sue Storm instead of Harley Quinn, a role in which she looks amazing.
It's definitely got people's interest peaked. I mean, we'll see how it actually turns out, but that trailer was very cool.
What is interesting, though, is that Kate Mara, who ultimately won the role of Sue Storm, wasn't Trank's first choice, and probably not his second or third or fourth either, because from what we can tell, he was against her casting, and it was Fox that essentially forced her down his throat, so to speak. So it would be kind of like cool to know, how close was Margot Robbie to getting the role? Could she have been Trank's preferred choice? And if not, then who? And if he had gotten her, maybe he would have acted better on set. Maybe the movie wouldn't have been such a disaster. Food for thought.
I would never in my life have picked Kate Mara to be the Invisible Woman ever.
What's also interesting is that I remember in an interview with Kate Mara said that she had actually auditioned for several superhero roles, and she had never gotten any. So she was quite happy about getting Sue Storm.
I mean, I'm sure there's a place for her in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or maybe what Warner Brothers is trying to build. So let's get to the box office. After 3 weeks of release and coming through its fourth weekend, Fant Four Stick has actually dropped down to number 16 in the movies that people are watching right now. So there are 15 movies released recently that are actually doing better than Fant Four Stick. So that's totally hemorrhaging. So domestically, it's grossed about $53 million, which you'll recall is about how much Ant-Man made in its opening weekend. And that was not even considered a major success. It was actually kind of a declining rate for Marvel. So actually this weekend in theaters, Ant-Man will approximately have made twice as much as Fantastic Four did this weekend, despite being about a month older than that. So Fantastic Four has been out for 3 weeks and Ant-Man's been out for a month and a half.
And Fantastic Four still hasn't made quite as much as Ant-Man did in its opening week. In fact, the way Fantastic Four is hemorrhaging, its total domestic gross might not be able to match Ant-Man's opening weekend by the time all is said and done, which is hugely embarrassing. And what is, if anything, is even worse is that it's almost certain that this movie's total domestic run is also going to be smaller than the opening weekends for the two previous Fantastic Four movies from 2005 and 2007, even unadjusted for inflation. So this movie is a massive flop for Fox, probably worse than in their worst nightmares. And they no doubt saw this coming, probably not quite as bad, but there's every reason to suspect that they expected the movie to underperform in a big way. Because what they did a few months back was that they moved up Hitman Agent 47 to open just 2 weeks after the Fantastic Four, probably to help soften the blow in case that underperformed. Of course, that didn't really work out for them, because Hitman also opened with 8% on Rotten Tomatoes and bombed big time at the box office as well. So
yeah,
they're in for a rough fiscal quarter. Their
number was terrible on Hitman. It was about $8 million for the opening weekend domestically. It looks like they might make about another $3 million this weekend, but it could be a little higher. In any case, yeah, 2 big duds in a row.
Hopefully this is extra motivation for Fox to unhand the Fantastic Four and send it back to Marvel, one way or the other.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit subscribe so you can catch all of our upcoming videos. For more podcasts, news, and reviews, check us out at midnightsedge.net and follow us on Twitter at midnightsedge. Also check out our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/midnightsedge.